Martha stood in awe, gazing at the spacious and beautiful house nestled by the river, just 30 meters away. The tranquility and serenity of the surroundings overwhelmed her, and she couldn't believe her luck. It was like a dream come true. Tom, her husband, shared her excitement, and together they found themselves concocting a new plan almost instinctively, to move to the countryside and take up farming. Despite lacking experience and facing financial constraints, their youthful enthusiasm and determination fueled their resolve. The house was well built, the land expansive, and the proximity of the forest, meadows, and river made it all the more enticing. When they inquired about the reason for selling, the owner mentioned a move to the south, seeming slightly uncomfortable. However, this didn't deter Martha and Tom. As summer began, Tom brought home a puppy, who quickly made himself at home, diligently guarding the property. Their favorite pastime became strolls in the dense forest nearby. What struck them was the absence of common trails or roads, giving the forest an untouched, wild aura. Even the locals seemed to avoid it. One warm morning, Martha noticed a group of neighbors gathered outside, engaged in a heated discussion. Sensing something amiss, she stepped out to observe, prompting the older woman among them to approach her. The longtime residents have learned to adapt, but you need to be aware, to avoid any harm. We steer clear of the forest, especially in the latter half of summer. And when the fog rolls in, we lock ourselves indoors. It's rare, but when it happens, we must be cautious. Fog? Martha's eyes widened in concern. What's wrong with the fog? The neighbor sighed deeply before continuing, it's no ordinary fog. Those who wander into it seldom return. There's something malevolent about it. Something ancient. Martha shivered as a strange chill ran down her spine. Despite her neighbor's words sounding like nonsense, there was an unsettling quality to them that sent fear coursing through her. You'll understand when you see the fog. It comes into the village once or twice a summer. Now listen carefully. This fog is different from the usual fog. It's thick and white like milk. It comes on quickly and covers the sky even on a clear day. If you're at home and you see the fog creeping towards the village, go inside and lock up the cattle. And don't come out until it clears. And if you're traveling in a car and the fog catches, stop and don't get out. Do not get out until the fog clears. And if it gets you in the woods or on the river, run. Run as fast as you can to get home, though he can be faster than a horse. When Tom returned from his fishing trip at lunchtime, Martha relayed the details of her conversation with the neighbor. He looked at her earnestly before bursting into laughter. He joked and laughed for quite some time, until Martha finally joined in. Her fears seemed to diminish, but they lingered. She began casting wary glances towards the woods and refrained from walking there with the puppy. A month passed, and the couple settled into their daily routine after acquiring goats. On a warm July morning, Tom headed into town for the usual shopping. After seeing him off, Martha tended to the household chores. The sun bathed the world in vibrant hues when an unusual sight caught her attention. White clouds, resembling more like smoke, swiftly drifted across the meadow. The milky white fog crept swiftly, blanketing the meadows and closing in on the village. Martha stood mesmerized, but the sounds of neighbors hurriedly calling for their loved ones snapped her back to reality. Doors slammed shut, dogs howled, and her own puppy joined in for the first time. With a sudden rush of panic, Martha grabbed the goat and her dog, ushering them inside. After securing the latch, she dashed around the house, closing windows. The animals, usually lively, grew unnaturally still. The dog sought refuge under the table, while the goat huddled beneath the bench. As the fog engulfed her home, Martha peered fearfully through the curtains, trembling uncontrollably. Unfathomable terror gripped her as she thought she heard voices, screams, and eerie songs. Something brushed against her walls and windows. When the front door handle began to turn, as if someone was attempting to enter, Martha's nerves failed, and she collapsed into unconsciousness. Meanwhile, Tom's car bounced along the uneven road, dodging potholes. The bright sun and the scent of field herbs filled the air as he drove. Suddenly, he noticed something unusual, an unnaturally white fog swirling rapidly within the forest, then spilling onto the road. Was the neighbor's warning coming true? Despite his skepticism and attempts to rationalize everything, fear gripped Tom as goosebumps prickled his skin. Attempting to continue driving, Tom hesitated, fearful of the road ahead. Suddenly, a shadow loomed in front of the car, prompting him to slam on the brakes. but there was no impact. Tom considered stepping out to investigate but thought better of it in the thick fog. Pulling off to the side, he switched on his hazard lights and waited for improved visibility. Yet, the fog only thickened, blocking out the sunlight. After about 10 minutes, movement caught Tom's eye. Turning, he saw a figure approaching, a figure hauntingly familiar. It was his father, bearing the same wrinkles, warm smile, and tired hands, even wearing the same sweater as he did before his passing. Wide-eyed and stunned, Tom watched as his father drew near, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. His father beckoned him close, expressing how much he missed him and questioning why his son seemed so distant. But Tom could only stare at him, his eyes filled with horror, his heart pounding in his ears, and cold sweat trickling down his forehead. After a few reproachful words and hurtful phrases, his father turned and vanished into the fog. Tom frantically wiped away the sweat, his mind struggling to process what had just occurred. Suddenly, Martha emerged from the fog, her body drenched in blood. Rushing to the car, she began frantically pulling at the door handle, screaming for Tom. Struggling, Tom raised his hand to unlock the doors when a sudden realization struck him like lightning. I can hear her too clearly. Indeed, the windows were tightly shut, yet Martha's voice sounded as if she were right beside him in the car. Slowly retracting his hand, Tom watched as his wife outside the window grew increasingly frantic, her actions becoming more erratic. The chaos around the car continued for another 20 agonizing minutes. Tom, shielding his ears with his hands, heard wild screams, roars, and a cacophony of voices both familiar and unfamiliar. The car shook as the door handles twitched, until abruptly, everything fell silent. With trembling hands, Tom gripped the steering wheel, turned the car around, and raced to find his wife. Back home, he pounded on the door until finally, a dog barked from inside, and Martha emerged, disheveled and in tears. Embracing each other tightly, they shared their harrowing experiences. Then, they ventured out to inspect their property. Everything appeared undisturbed, except for the absence of the goat they had left in the meadow during the fog. All they found was a metal peg hammered into the ground and a broken rope nearby. Having survived the ordeal, they sought explanations from the locals, but no one could offer any coherent answers. After much deliberation, they decided to put their house up for sale.